The discouraging thing is that they never remember that they took this questionnaire till I give them and then they go, oh yeah.
I'd like to add that as I ask my students to write their personal code of ethics and their philosophies and so forth, what I notice, these are freshmen and sophomores, there are folks that will change their majors because they realize that going after just a dollar bill, it's not going to be a legacy in terms of the Bill Daniels vision. They want to move towards what they can really contribute with their strengths, and I'm happy to see that. Yes?
In your presentation, you talked about how you need to be like fully integrated and make sense to yourself to feel happy. But in order to do that, you need to understand what sort of things are in conflict. And I find that a lot of my students don't even grasp the inherent contradictions of a lot of their own things. So if they can't even grasp the contradictions, how are they supposed to be uncomfortable with them?
That's a very good question. I think that's a work in progress, but part of what I noticed that our group, we read a lot. We read, and through literature and reading, we've reflected upon our identities. And so you have to encourage them to read and not just play video games, but there's more to assessing the same. So I don't know, it's kind of like you have to invite them to continue that growth process. But they do enjoy the discussions where they find out that other people from other places completely put the world together in different ways. And that's what I like about this campus. We have so many international students. I host 2 international students right now that are waiting to get their jobs. And so daily, when they're sending out their resumes, they're asking me ethical questions about what they should put into their resumes. And there was a famous company that called and said, you have indicated that you have 2 or 3 years experience in telemarketing or telecommunications. And they said, would you consider increasing that to 6 to 8 years? And so the young man asked me, what should I do? And I said, tell them no. Because when you get out there, if you do get the job and you don't have that experience, what are you going to do on day 1 when you're in charge of a project? So I find that when they're building the resume, you've got to start with ethical conduct.
There's a question here, but I just want to add something to your question. And you alluded to, if you go to the psych department, they'll talk to you about the students, and they're not consistent, they won't be comfortable. And in interest of self-disclosure, I'm a social psychologist by training, so it's cognitive dissonance. The problem is, like you were alluding to, is if they don't realize the dissonance, how does it affect them? And the way I handle that is I have a lecture on early in the semester, and you have to get personal. So I'll ask the class, how many of you smoke? And there's always a handful of people who smoke. And I say, okay, what does smoking do to your lungs? And then they'll tell you, and then they realize, okay, my knowledge about my health is inconsistent with my behaviors. And I'll use the example with smoking. Is anyone familiar with the body exhibit that tours around? If you, I had a student, I came here from Auburn, and I had a great student who went on to med school. And we were at a conference together in Atlanta, and it was there. He asked if I would go with him to the exhibit, and I went. And they have a box, 3 boxes. One box has, if you're not familiar with the body exhibit, it's basically some process to preserve human organs so they can be put on display. And so there's a human set of lungs that are perfectly healthy. Next to that, there's a set of smokers' lungs, and they're black, they're shriveled up, they look disgusting. And next to that is a clear box with a slot in the top. And what do you think the box is filled with? Packets of cigarettes. The people walk through, they think to themselves, I kind of would rather look like that, but my behaviors are causing me to look like that. And then there's that third empty box, they drop their cigarettes. And granted, a lot of them go back out and they buy a pack of cigarettes. but my experience has been you have to make that discrepancy, you have to make them aware of it. They're not going to just get it. Like you're saying, your students don't get it. You have to take them down that path. and have them think about, like Grace Ann asking them, have you ever been asked to do things that you wish you hadn't done? Well, there's going to be dissonance there, right? Because nobody likes to think of themselves. The mid 80% and the top 10% don't like to think of themselves as being bad, but now you're asking them for examples of when they've done things they weren't so proud of. That's making them aware of that dissonance. But if you just assume that they're going to have it, they probably won't. Sorry, I cut you off.
Somebody said international, and that sparked me. What's your experience been with students from different parts of the world? Because I think, at least, we have this feeling maybe that the ethics are maybe different in other parts of the world for different things. Have you seen that or not? Or
Absolutely. Sure.
Yep.
Well, I mean, if you think about it as, from a principle-based approach, the principles that you believe in inform what you think is ethical and unethical. Well, if you believe in a completely different set of principles, then yours are going to be different ethics, and you'll say, oh, this thing is ethical. Now, there are some commonalities across human beings that, there tend to be things that we all say, oh, that's completely wrong. But there are going to be areas where we differ.
We have an increasing number of Chinese students.
Okay.
And talking about international marketing, and one of the things we always talk about is we outsource to take advantage of cheaper labor. And so I got a bunch of Chinese students, and I was very blunt. I said, how do you feel about Chinese people working for $1 an hour in those factories? And I asked one of the Chinese students, would you like to do that? Oh, no, I wouldn't like to do that. I said, but it's okay for other people. Well, it's okay for them, but not okay for me. Which is very interesting, different, even where they are and who they are, whether it's okay or not, or ethical or not.
Well, can I add? Unfortunately, I'm a Chinese. I'm from Taiwan, not mainland China. But we had the similar discussions about this since I teach international business. And I have talked to Bruce at least a couple of times that I might be hopefully the next candidate to the fellow because I want to do international business ethics studies. So my framework will be compare country to country, based on their cultural roots, what shaped them into their value systems, and shape their business ethics. While some principle will be the same, across the board, they will be the same, but different business practices from different culture system will create, I believe, different kind of ethics, value, or system. And so that's why I have been talking to Bruce a couple times over now, and so I want to do that kind of research, the studies. At the same time, I want to incorporate the case-by-case study system into my international business classroom. And so then students can learn like what the presenters, the panels had suggested and have practices in their classrooms. But at the same time, I can do some research component to see side-by-side, so that's what I'm interested in. That's why I'm here.
Don't you think also the economic system of that country would have a big influence?
Right. It would be. And then so to sort of add that more and more Chinese students in your classroom, I have the similar questions to my students. I say, well, I mean, in India, in China, that our wage is $1 per hour. Would you want to do it? And then some of them says, no, I'm in US, I want to earn $8, $9, $10 per hour. But one of the students or two, they says, oh, that my sister and brother in China do it. So they themselves don't want to do it, but if others do it, even though their siblings doing it, they probably won't mind. And so it's just a dilemma in this case. And so that's something that it will be interesting that if I take a chance to study it.
I remember some time ago sitting in on a workshop where I think it may have been on the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act where the issue of bribery came up. And the speaker seemed very credible, knowledgeable, asserted that no one has been able to find a country where bribery is considered acceptable. There are many countries where it happens more often, where it's rationalized away more easily. But it's, even in those countries, it's done, bring the money to my house, or put it in an envelope, or stick it over here, or come see me at night, bring it to me tonight, not now, that sort of thing. So there's a stigma attached in every country that they looked at that time. I don't know if there's more recent research. I thought that was interesting because it went against what my knee-jerk reaction is.
I just find it troublesome sometimes with some of our students who haven't been out of the country or haven't been exposed to different ways of thinking, that sometimes, I think we have to be really careful. Sometimes they assume that Americans have superior ethics and superior ways of thinking to other people's, and I sometimes have to remind them that economically we're in a position, in a place where we can afford to enjoy certain privileges, but in other countries that are where we were 100 years ago in the Industrial Revolution, they're at an earlier place. So if people are forced to work for $1 an hour, it's not because they have lesser morals, it's because that's where they are economically. And many of our American corporations take advantage of exactly that to pull out of this country where we lose jobs here so that they can earn higher profits and exploit that labor in other countries and pay them $1 an hour, when they could easily make profits by paying $4 an hour and a living wage in other countries. So I think we have to be really careful about saying a particular group, whether it's Chinese or American businesses in other countries. I think human beings have a tendency to exploit if there's an opportunity. And I would just be very careful about, identifying a particular group or religious group or ethnicity or race or nationality or any group as being less ethical or less moral than another.
Well, I don't think that there's any group that's more or less ethical. I think there are international and cross-cultural differences in what we perceive as ethical, and we might, as Americans, not agree that this is ethical that they're doing over there that they think is perfectly fine. But I think you're always going to have that bottom 10% who want to game the system, exploit everybody for their advantage, and that top 10% who will not do it because their integrity is very important, and then the 80% in the middle. I just finished reading a book called When Money Dies, and it was about Central Europe after World War I. And here was an industrialized countries of Germany, Austria, Hungary, and the things that they went through during this period of hyperinflation, where the public servants, their incomes couldn't increase because you know how it is when times are tough. When we work for the state, the universities or whatever, our incomes don't increase, and yet the value of the money that they were getting was quickly becoming worthless, and so bribery became very rampant among public servants, where that was how they had to feed their families. You want this permit, you're going to have to give me the bribe. And so economics can play a part and can lead to people behaving in a way that is less ethical. It doesn't mean that they say, oh, it's all right, everything's fine. They knew it was wrong. They didn't want to do it. And in fact, the Hungarians really resisted. The Hungarian civil servants almost would rather starve than have taken any of these bribes, because it was just so much against what they believed. But you get to a point where it's really, really tough. And so what you need is some people from that top 10% to say, no, this isn't right, and we've got to change the system so that people aren't put in these situations.